Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Behind the Bars. This is episode 7 from the 2009 Big Buck GNCC, featuring a battle to the wire between the two men you're going to see on screen here in just a minute. But first, we're going to be joined by our Behind the Bars resident historian, GNCC historian, and also junior trail boss, Jared Bolton. Jared, thanks for being with us today.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Another awesome episode. This will be a little painful for Adam to watch yet again. But all in all, this is going to be a great race, well worth the watch. And hey, even if you're a bike racer, stick around and watch the whole thing because to me, great racing is great racing. It don't matter if it's 2 wheels or 4.
All right, and the gentleman who provided this great racing action for us today, starting off with the winningest ATV rider of all time, the winningest GNCC rider of all time, Chris Board's coming to us today from Sunbury, Pennsylvania. Chris, thanks for being with us, and thanks for being you along with Adam today, being the first returning guest on this new feature here with GNCC and Behind the Bars.
Yeah, definitely glad to be a part of it, and glad we picked another good race. It was a great race between me and Adam back in the day, so look forward to reliving it.
All right, and the other half of the dynamic duo that made this action happen, the Gator himself, Adam McGill, joining us from West Virginia today. Adam, thanks for being with us here today.
It's good to be back. I'm not super pumped to get to. I mean, you think there'd be better racing than showing them getting my whooped at the end, but I guess that's all they want to do is pick on me. So, being the 2 oldest guys, 2 of the 3 oldest guys that are racing pro. Pretty badass.
And a little bit of a trend there. This is, Adam, your second time on the show. Both times you're beaten essentially in the final corners. Chris, this is your second time on the show. And both of these races come down to the final corners and you pull them out. So we'll talk more about that later, but we're starting to see an emerging trend. Adam, obviously you getting the job done 17 times in your career. Chris, these last lap passes were nothing new to you, but at the time, this one was one of the ones that kind of started that the Borich, I guess you would say, those final turn passes. So without further ado, we're going to go into the video and we're going to watch it all unfold and see exactly how it played out just a few years ago.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome once again to RacerTV, covering the Can-Am.
Man, so is Adam, it just me, or does Weege look really creepy there? We can pick on Weege instead of pick on Adam all the time. He just looked a little creepy there in that first instant clip there.
I bet he's got a bunch of dicks under his porch. For sure.
So this is actually footage from the previous race there in Steel Creek, ending up being won by Brian Cook. We'll talk more about that later. But 3 different winners coming in to the first 3 rounds, or into this round 4 for Big Buck. And Adam, you at this point had not, or you had a win you did not have a win yet coming into this race. It was Taylor Kaiser had won the opening round in Florida. Chris, you had won in Georgia, and then Brian Cook coming through with the win. So this was kind of your momentum really looking to get rolling, Adam, and obviously we'll find out if it works out for you. But here's what you had to say before this one got started.
Going into the day, it's definitely looking good. It's one of my favorite tracks, and won here last year, so hoping to definitely put the orange KTM in the middle of the box.
Had a good race last race.
Everything was orange back then. Everything. How much my poop paper was orange at that point.
We know what it takes now, and never had one this early in the
I don't
season,
understand. I still don't understand why we always went back there. But it seemed like the track always suited me best. But what was the year? That was later when you and Taylor got into it, right, Chris?
Yeah, I think it was a few years.
Adam McGill came out of the gate firing. He won 3 of the first 4 GNCC events.
Well, the Taylor and Chris incident was at North Carolina. That was at Steel Creek, not Big Buck.
We've only had one muddy Big Buck ever that I remember. Haven't we?
Yeah, we've been. That's funny. Big Buck's kind of an anomaly on the schedule. It's like. It has seriously been the luckiest event of all time, really only having like one bad mud race that I can never remember. And maybe, there's been times that it's been a little wet, but it's never been a true full-blown mud fest.
That's what she said.
Let's go racing here. XC1 Pro Class will start first.
$250
Oh my
on the line from
God, look how big the row is.
And it looks like Kaiser. Oh, and a rider's gone flipping around the outside.
I think that was Ryan Lane that went flipping from the looks of things.
Balance out front on the number 1, and that is old school Balance grabbing the good start. Kaiser right behind him. Remember, Kaiser won a race.
I can't get over how big the row was then.
He's trying to get his first win.
Yeah, we had a full row.
Obviously improved quite a bit. Started the year off with cancer.
You remember it was like you had to get there early to even get a spot, let alone, I mean, get to choose a spot, because then they didn't let us choose, did they?
And look at Kaiser getting kicked around in those fields as Balance puts
I think in 2009 we were already lining up by points. Yeah.
Were we?
Yeah.
I couldn't remember.
Yeah, that,
North Carolina. Looks like Cook is up.
That started a few years before that.
Some of the other Yamaha guys trying to work their way forward, keep the pace. And there is McGill.
Hey, what are you doing over there, Adam?
Line there for McGill, all the way on the right.
I'm getting creative.
The riders have to learn this stuff as they ride.
Look at that.
These
Way
guys
out
are
there.
using every last
Mine's
one of
really
them
glitchy.
to try to make passes early. Jared McClure on the number 10. Balance still leading. Look at how hard Kaiser is going to try to keep.
You remember, was it that year we was jumping off that bank right there? Remember the big roots and the banks we were jumping off of right next to it?
Followed by McGill.
Yeah, I think they actually just showed that, and we still run that section.
Yeah, but we used to jump, like instead of running down, we used to turn early and jump off them big roots, and then in like across the creek. But now there's a bunch of people standing there and you can't.
Creek jump, one of those infamous obstacles out here in South Carolina, and the order remains the same. Everyone probably plotting out a strategy now.
The creek jump, that was the old one before the one that they've built now.
A long 2-hour race. So I think Kaiser just wants to keep balance.
The one going the opposite direction that we ran for many, many years. And there we see Chris and Adam. You guys are right together, the number 2 and 3 machines. For those at home that may not remember, Adam was on a KTM at the time, Chris on a Suzuki. They've both changed rides since then. But, you know, guys, coming into this one, obviously, Adam, the year previous, in 2008, you had won 4 races early in the season and kind of caught everybody off guard. Ultimately, that championship kind of came down between you and Bill at the end of the year. Even though you did end up number 3, you technically still had a really good shot going into the end of the season. Chris was able to kind of nip you out there for the number 2 at the end of the season. So I think you had a lot of steam built up coming into the season, and a lot of people were expecting wins right away. So coming into round 4, what was your mindset? And, you know, what were you thinking? Were you kind of thinking, man, I got to get this done now? Or back then, was it just, I want to win every race?
Well, at that time, that was when, so 8 was a good year because everybody was putting money into the racing. Everybody was buying quads and all that. In 2009, I entered the series and budgets got cut. My salaries got cut. Everything got cut right off the top before season even started. So in order to be able to continue to make a living, I was like, well, you know, win races is great, but I definitely need to make it more consistent. So that was my thing. I'm like, well, I know you can win races, or I know you can win a championship without winning races throughout the whole year. I do know that, and I've seen it done, motocross and stuff like that. So I knew it was possible, but I was just trying to stay consistent to try to be able to continue to go to all the races by then, because I know that things were getting tough, even for you, Chris, you know, with the Suzuki thing, because it was starting to we're starting to pull out.
Yeah, that was right around the time, like you said, didn't know what was gonna go on, so tried to just, I don't know, do our best and make it to the races and see what we can do.
How badass is that Iron Cross bumper?
Opposite situation for you. You had actually had a really rough season in 2008, which was your first year on the LTR, and then you were able to come back, and at the end of the season, you were able to grab that number 2. Obviously, Bill Balance winning his 9th championship in 2008, and then you were kind of put in a position coming into 2009 where nobody was really sure if we were going to see the Chris that we'd seen previously that was battling for championships, or the Chris that only won 1 race in 2009. So what was the offseason like? And obviously, having already won in Georgia, what was your mindset coming into this race? Were you looking to kind of establish your dominance and grab a handle on this championship?
Yeah, I mean, the first year getting the Suzuki ride, it was just, we came out guns blazing. We were able to get a win right away. And then it was just, I think we picked up 3 that year through the first round, middle of the season, and the last race. And it just took me a little bit to figure out the bike, and then once we got the bike figured out, it seemed like it was game on from there. And like you said, got a win in the second round, and then coming in here, knew we had the bike set up and the mindset to go forward. And obviously, like you said, back then the companies were helping out quite a bit. Didn't really know year to year, but I knew if you start winning, you can make pretty good money and make a good living at doing it. You can obviously get wins. So that was the mindset going into that. And see how it plays out here.
And we see obviously Taylor Kaiser leading the way, Bill Balance there in second. Those guys, lived together, trained together at the time. Taylor was staying up in Kentucky with Bill. And Adam, the year previous in 2008, Taylor had actually been your KTM teammate in the first year in the KTM effort. What was it like for you? Obviously Taylor had won the opening round in Florida. You didn't have a win yet. Was it a little bit frustrating for you to see your teammates at KTM had let go in favor of you at this point, ahead of you in the points and having won a race? Were you kind of motivated by that to go after him?
Honestly, it didn't bother me one bit. I really get a kick out of when people take it so personal that everybody thinks that we hate each other and all that. Well, I do hate people, but I just think it's nuts when people was like, oh, well, you got to have some fire, you got to do this, you got to do that. And really, it didn't make a damn bit of difference because at the end of the day, I knew the further we went up north, the less strong he would get, and which it happened. But Taylor was a good racer. He still is. I still think he could do it. I remember the one race he come out in 2000, that dump there at the golf course that he raced, and damn near won the overall that year. It was a muddy mess. I mean, he hadn't raced in 2 damn years, and he comes out and almost wins the race. So I think he's just one of the naturally talented guys. But, yeah, coming into that round, we didn't have really any wins, any luck at that point. So for me, it was just try to get to the damn finish line and not have any problems.
And you're working your way up, both you and Chris, together. You guys pretty much have each other in sight, at least throughout the race thus far that we've seen. Not the lead yet, but you guys are definitely keeping each other in sight. And seems like all the players were up front in this one pretty much the whole time. I mean, you guys all had a shot to do it, and we're going to see how it unfolds here. As we come to the pit stops, that's kind of when things change. Do you guys remember how this all played out?
No, I've lost the footage, but can't find it for some reason. But
I kind of remember it. I remember Adam kept going on the pit, and I was going to pull into the pit, and I knew he was a really good sprinter. So we were able to hook up, kind of drop those guys, and then it was just basically a battle between me and him.
And that really did end up being kind of a defining moment of the race for you two to separate yourself from the pack. Adam, as Chris pointed out, you may not have seen it on screen there, but you guys came into the pit. Everyone else pitted for fuel. You kept going. Chris had intended to pit, kept going, started chasing you, and that's where you guys were able to pick up the pace and pull away. So, do you remember kind of what you were thinking as far as you can see on screen here? I don't know if you can see or not, Adam, but you're charging and Chris is all over you, and you guys are looking back and steadily pulling away from Bill Balance, who is in third at the time. Do you remember any of this and how it played out and what your thoughts were?
I always knew that Chris couldn't charge, but he could definitely follow.
True. I'd rather be chasing, but Adam has good speed.
Hey, go fast. I'll follow to you. I'll watch you. I'm like, come on, really?
Keep going.
Go. You're almost there. And I'm like, okay. I think I just laugh at how young we were and not a care in the world and just riding four-wheelers at that time. And it just, that was definitely something that we could do. For some reason, then it seemed like if we would get together, we could run. It didn't matter if it was a rocket ship hooked to a dinosaur. We'd run it down. It wouldn't matter because it was, wouldn't it? I mean, back then it was like you could run down minutes. But now I just don't understand it now. Evidently, machines maybe have gotten better, or we've gotten older, or coronavirus. Who knows?
Yeah, I think it's the corona.
COVID-19.
And we're headed back toward
Oh,
the
look
finish
at me
line.
lurking.
And here we see you guys. Adam, do you have the video back
Here
now?
we are.
I don't have
Look over
anything.
his
I
shoulder.
can't find
He
it.
knows Borch
It's
is
gone. I
right
clicked on it.
It's showing you guys battling through what ultimately will be the finish line. This is the final turn coming to finish. This is not the end of the race. This is about midway through. You guys are battling wheel to wheel, and now you're coming into pit. Adam, you're still in the lead. Chris is right behind you. And at this point, you guys don't have an option. You have to pit, but you pulled a pretty good gap at this point, and you made it apparent that it is a two-rider battle, and you guys are out the pit at exactly the same gap that you had coming in, and the sprint is back on to the finish.
Yeah, I remember. It's funny because everybody is like, oh, well, there's strategy to pit, this and that. And I think we missed the pit because my dad's always been the guy who's like, I'm the best gas giver in the country. Well, he's just my dad. But I remember that they would talk like this, him and my dad, and they'd be like, let's just send them guys. Let's just send them. So they sent us out. And we run another lap, and that was able to give us that gap. And, I mean, the track was good enough. We didn't really have to worry about any bottlenecks. And believe it or not, I don't remember a whole lot of traffic back then either, like catching people for some reason. Do you, Chris?
No, I mean, watching the film right now, it looks like it was just us out there. There's hardly any lappers.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a sprocket guard on that one, or did you have a skid?
I put a skid on.
Oh, that's why.
So Miguel out of West Virginia and Borch out of Pennsylvania are battling now in the field.
Oh, man.
To the inside, can Borch tuck it under?
So
you know what
here we go.
there?
This is the setup where it all unfolds.
That's what got me. Bump steer.
There's the path. Path heard around the world at the moment. And Chris, Adam up. Adam, you can't see on screen here, but you're trying everything. You're back inside, back outside, and Chris is able to square you up, and you guys are working your way to the finish now, and the intensity is just off the charts.
Yeah. You know what really put a dampener in the situation was when Yamaha cried and boo-hooed and they couldn't run the 5 1/4s anymore. Remember that? That's what. So I had to learn how to ride 2 machines in 2 years. I learned how to ride one, was super dominant, and then everybody cried and boo-hooed, and I couldn't race anymore. So that was one thing I had to learn. I had to learn how to ride a 450 again after riding a bike that was legal for every year until that one. So, but yeah, it was a good race. I would have much rather put Chris in the tree or in the bush, but I knew I was going to get him eventually. Just took me another year, but I got him.
That's what we're looking forward to. Here's the results. Cook and Kaiser ran up.
So we see the results there. Obviously, Chris, you ended up with the win. Adam in second. Bill Balance in third. Brian Cook fourth. Taylor Kaiser fifth. So kind of the players all were up front all day. Adam, here's what you had to say about it after the race.
Chris didn't pit and everybody else did. And from then on, we just kind of pulled and set a lead. And I stopped at the beginning of the last lap and got fuel and got back out in front of him. And he passed me going into the woods. And I got back around him and held the lead clear up until, I don't know, about 100 yards from the finish. But you know what? It's one of them things, and he run me clean. He run me really well. So I mean, it was a good time, and I'm glad we
ran it
got
right up
there.
the did.
Like I said, you got to be consistent.
Look at that terrible goatee,
and it'll pay off in the end. Big picture.
Soul patch.
Well, here is the big picture, and McGill actually lost a few points today, but he'll be in it for the long run.
Awesome.
Let's talk to our winner, Chris Borch.
We finally got a good start.
I completely.
Suzuki,
Oh my God!
awesome out there. Like I said, we got like a top 5 and
sick hat, bro.
Is that a belly button rig?
Flat rim, earring.
Towards the end there, it was second lap. Bill and
like,
Taylor pitted, and Adam decided to keep going, and I followed him and pulled away. Probably pulled a good 30, 40 seconds. Came on to the white flag lap. We finally pitted. Didn't see anybody around, and basically it was just a battle between me and Adam. And right towards the end here, I got by him in one of the corners. But like I said, the Suzuki Yoshimura bike was flawless out there, and glad to get another win.
Where's the necklace at?
No puka shell at that time, bud.
No puka shells at that time. Had to change him in for a shark tooth with my name on it.
So Chris, ultimately, this was. I can't say that this was your first win that kind of came in the final turns, but, you know, if Rodney and Jason, it became the term the Borich. You know, you would follow somebody and make those passes in the final turns, the final miles. And this was the one of the first ones that was made famous, you know, because this replay is played out so many times. And I don't even know that we could count how many dozens of those 75 wins, 76, I forget. Griff's the historian, and Jared, they probably know exactly. But, you know, those guys, they didn't really know what was coming at this point. And this was one of the first ones that really made it happen. You know, did you just relish in that opportunity and say, like, hey, that was pretty cool, I want to do it again? Because I feel like that at this time in 2009, this early in the season, that couldn't have been the plan coming in. It just kind of evolved, no?
Yeah, I mean, it just happened, and I knew we were really good at cornering and setting people up, and like you said, I'd be the follower and just wait for the weak links or see how he'd enter a corner, and I just figured it out over the years where I can come inside, outside, put it wherever I want to get it to make a pass. And like you said, on this one here, it kind of was a breakthrough year for me on that one. Like you said, replay after replay of inside, outside move, and was able to drive away. But yeah, like I said, Adam back then was really good at sprinting, getting out front, and I knew if we could latch on to him, we could pretty much drop everybody. So that was the plan at that race.
Well, and that kind of leads us to our next question. And Adam, this one's for you. You know, in 2008, you won those 4 races, and you did it early in the season. You did it by sprinting away early. You just used your speed, where GNCC had been such a strategy and a chess match up till that point. So for you to kind of sprint away, get those wins, and then here we are a year later, you and Chris are able to do it again in this race and sprint away from everybody. This really signified kind of the changing of the guard. You know, Bill would always play that wait and see game. Not even necessarily like Chris chasing the leader, but he would just kind of run his own race and always assume that by the end of the race, you know, he'd be able to get up in there and battle for the win, which had worked for so many years. But you guys had just ratcheted the pace up. So, you know, what do you think about kind of being credited as the rider who really started that whole sprinting away thing, and which has evolved into the way we race today?
I remember talking with some older racers like Wayne Darnold and DeLulo a little bit. I spoke with him through a second party, and then obviously Bill a couple weeks ago on the thing, and they said it was like early 90s, late 90s was a race, but more of a trail ride to who had the last pass at the race. Don't know, because obviously I didn't start till 2002 or 3, I think, was my first national. And after that, I came into it, and it was still a race. At least for me, it was, because I thought it was like the fastest thing in the whole country. And then that year, I remember it plain as day. I remember a kid. It was this November or December. I got a call from 3 different manufacturers at that time wanting me to race their machines. I chose KTM, obviously, and I remember reading in that contract that they could put you up to any kind of physical fitness thing at any time if they feel you haven't been training or doing what you're supposed to do. So I ended up losing 55 pounds from November to whenever the first race was, then in March, 1st of March, second weekend of March. And I remember just go right from the flag, just go. And that's what I would do, but it's always easier to follow than it is to lead. Obviously, Chris is the best follower in the country. So, but he would follow, and then he would, while I was charging, he would be looking. And I think that's where it bit me. But then a couple years go by, then we have Walker coming up, and Walker's changed it. And so now it's playing catch up with him. The only problem I had was I was like a bull in a china shop. I would just shit up. Didn't matter what the hell it was. If there was a rock or a tree or something. Remember at Somerset when I hit that rock in front of you, Chris, like 90 mile an hour, just blew the whole front wheel off of it?
Yeah, I do remember that.
Mm-hmm. Didn't matter. Full gas all the time.
Yeah.
But I think that's, but then it was back then it was different. I mean, you would race and you would charge, but there was always that end thing that you would have to fight with. And Chris was the one that figured out. And then obviously as years go past, we started catching on. But honestly, Chris, I only ever remember now correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm never wrong. Ask my wife. I remember there was one race, and I think it was Ironman in 11. Remember those dusty, like powder dust? You run off. You led the whole day, and that was one of the only races I remember you ever leading, more than this much.
Yeah, I think somebody said, "Oh, you can't lead a race or you can't run away," and I was like, "All right, this is the perfect race to get a good start, blow some sand or dust berms up, and just take off and lead all day." So that was that day.
I run you down 4 times, and I was like,
even in trying to prove a point, you picked the ultimate strategy race to actually run away, because there's no way anyone could follow that day. That was possibly the dustiest GNCC in history. So, yeah, I mean, I think this race is significant for a lot of reasons. Obviously, a battle down to the finish, between two of the sport's all-time greats, Adam and Chris. You guys have obviously established yourself over the 11 years since then, and we're already well established as race winners and championship contenders at the time. But to see you guys at this point kind of distance yourselves from the pack by the way you attack the race, like you pointed out, Adam, I mean, it's kind of, this was the style of racing for many years to come until, maybe until we saw the entry of Walker into the equation. So this was 2009. Walker won his first overall in 2011, but wasn't a consistent threat to win races until and for championships until 2013-14. So this lasted for 4 years or so, where you guys were kind of racing this way, and nobody else was able to consistently do it any better. So if you look back, obviously Barry attacked racing differently than Bill. Going back before Barry, Bob Sloan, Adam, guys you mentioned like Chuck DeLulo and those guys, they attacked racing differently. So it's a constant evolution, and races like this are so significant because they really kind of give you that benchmark. Hey, this was the day where we figured out that this was actually going to work. And you guys figured out that sprinting away was going to work. And Chris, you figured out that you could leave just that little bit extra in reserve and save it to the final turn.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about it now, back in the day, like, I never really wanted to lead. I was always the follower, and I seemed like it was more fun racing with someone than trying to get away. So that's kind of why I think I could have probably sprinted away at that point. I felt like I was in pretty good shape. I had the bike set up really well. I think I probably could have gapped these guys quite a bit, but I figured I'd just sit behind and play.
Could have gapped nothing. Take you to Gapplebee's, son, next time.
Oh, boy. Well, it was awesome to watch then. It's awesome to rewatch it now. Jared, this was a little bit before your full entry into GNCC. As being a bike guy growing up, this is one of those races that I think really brought more eyes to the ATV side of things, especially when it hit television. What's something like this look like from, at the time, an outsider's perspective, to see a battle? People used to think that Chris used to manufacture these races this way just for drama. I mean, what do you think?
I've heard that discussion before, and it all like you said, that was I didn't start working at the races until the end of the next season. So from somebody who was just basically just a kid coming to the races at that point, it definitely was looked that way to me, from the outside looking in. And I'm not going to lie, I was so focused on the bike side that I didn't give the ATV guys, a whole lot of love back then.
Nerd.
But I've never been one of those guys that was like, you quad guys ruin everything. I've always had a great appreciation for the quad side because, man, I've tried riding those things. I don't know how you guys do it, especially going that fast.
I can tell you what it takes, 2 of.
Yeah, 2 more
throttle
wheels and a
hand,
motorcycle.
a throttle hand and a clutch hand is what it takes to properly ride an ATV at speed, I suppose, is what Adam was referring to. But yeah, it was absolutely, like I said, I mean, if you look at this race, you break it down, all the dynamics that played out, and looking back on it now, historically, 11 years later, it's just one of those things that you didn't realize how significant what you were watching on screen at the time was. It was just exciting, and everybody was cheering, and everybody was running. But Chris, this was, as mentioned in the race report from this race, this was really kind of where you established your stranglehold on the 2009 season, which ultimately leads to your first of 6 GNCC championships. So this is kind of the beginning of the Borich dynasty. What were your thoughts after this race? Was it just another win, or did you kind of have a feeling that maybe you were getting something rolling, and you and Adam had kind of distanced yourselves from the pack? Bill, to this point, now 4 races in, the previous 9-time in a row champion, did not have a win, was off form for a lot of reasons coming into the season. And ultimately, this is kind of where you started to pull away.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, looking back on it, this is where just everything started clicking for me. Bike setup to me just meshing with the bike to training and being ready to go and just figuring out how to do the Borich thing. So we were able to, like you said, capitalize 2 wins there, second round and 4, and then we just were able to get some more wins going. But yeah, like you said, just playing with these guys at that point.
I remember walking around the pits and people going bananas trying to figure out what you were doing.
What do you mean?
They're like, oh, McGill, you think he's running the bike slower in the front so corners better? I'm like, I don't know. They're like, he's got a light and flywheel in it. And I'm like, maybe. They're like, oh my God, he's got an extra camshaft in that 350 small block. I was like, what? No, but I remember people doing all this banana stuff. They're like, he's running the bike lower, he's doing this. And I remember when you had Fox then, and I remember everybody's like, them gold shots or something different on them.
Yeah.
Like,
I had like a button on my handlebars that I could lower it when I go in the corners and then pump it up.
I know. I remember people telling me that stuff, and I'm just like, oh my God. So guess what I did? I tried it. It didn't work. It was terrible.
You started chasing your tail, right?
Yeah,
Never do that. I've had that happen already. Trying to figure stuff out and just makes it worse.
I'm gonna try. This thing's gonna turn on a cow turd, and it doesn't.
Well, and it's crazy. Like looking back at this race, like I said, I mean, Chris, ultimately you start to establish yourself as a real championship. Well, you'd been a contender for many years, but as a championship for leading the way, and ultimately we know you ended up winning this championship. But people start questioning, and there's always these crazy theories and accusations. It still exists today. It's the beauty of racing. Like you can't. It's hard for people, whether it be Bill when he was on top or Barry when he was on top. Barry was a little different because he kind of left on top. He didn't actually ever get beaten for an ATV championship, not ever, but at the end he moved on to bikes and left that championship behind. But it's tough, because you guys are in this position where you're so used to winning, you're so used to being on top, and not just the guys on top, but everyone else. When you get a new guy up there, it's like, it can't just be that somebody's found more speed or doing things differently. There's these crazy theories of, he's running nitrous, like you said, Adam. I mean, all this stuff. I guess it's just the inner competitor. It's hard to look in the mirror and say, hey man, if I want to be up there and I want to battle for wins, I'm going to have to change something up. And it's not necessarily with my bike. It may be with me and the way I attack the races. But obviously here we are 11 years later, both you guys still contending for wins week in and week out. So hats off to you guys for being able to do that for so long. Adam, you got your first win in 2007?
8.
Okay.
8 was yep.
Wow,
that was the first
KTM
one.
was your first win.
Yep. The first win, biggest win, and their first win. So it was a pretty big day there.
Can you get it at Georgia?
Yeah, let's bring it all back. You remember Florida 2009? Remember you talked about that where Taylor won it, and then we go to the next round, and somebody who won that Georgia
won.
that.
Chris won.
Okay, Chris won it barely, and then you have Brian Cook, and then Chris again by the hair on his chin, which he didn't have any. You remember in Florida? You remember how rough that crap used to get there at River Ranch and how deep. And I remember last lap, I passed you and Taylor, and I'm like, yeah, gonna get me a win down here. And it sucked the air filter so closed and it wouldn't run. You burn a clutch and Taylor burn a clutch, and we're running like 7 miles an hour trying to race each other and plowed all these sandbirds. And we're just like, this is the biggest joke ever. You remember that? Remember that, Rick?
Yeah, I remember it.
Oh my! I remember it was like quarter throttle. You couldn't go much more than that because it started slipping. I was just like, oh my God, it's terrible. It'd be like, boom, boom, and sand plowing over the hood. That was good stuff.
The bench racing between you two could go on forever, certainly. We are on a limited time schedule here, and Griff, the producer, is telling us it's time to check in with you guys and find out. Obviously, we've had both you guys on the show. Chris, you were on just 2 weeks ago, I believe it was. But we'll start with you. What's been going on these last couple weeks? What's been going on these last 6 weeks since we've last seen you? And what are your thoughts about, potentially getting back to racing soon? Are you ready to go? Are you wanting to get back to racing? What do you got going on?
Nah, just been hanging out on the couch, man. Just chilling, hanging out with the baby, just living it up, quarantining myself. Nah, kidding. We've been chomping at the bit. Obviously, there was supposed to be a race on the 2nd. Obviously, that got canceled now. Now our next opportunity would be the 16th, and didn't hear anything yet, so we just keep working forward towards that. So we've been doing a lot of testing with the bike, with the new Phoenix team, getting the suspension dialed in with the Elkas and the Elkas and the Walsh, and just been doing that a bunch, and been getting into the Zwifting thing on cycling, so that's been a lot of fun. Hanging out with the wife and the baby, watching her grow. So just enjoying the family time, but really chomping at the bit, ready to get back racing and try to get this Honda back up on the front.
Well, it sounds like you've definitely kept busy throughout the past 6 weeks, and obviously with our hopeful return to racing coming sooner than later, as we all hope. It's going to be fast and furious, so definitely good to get some time relaxing at home there in Sunday. Chris, thanks for filling us in on exactly what you've had going on these last several weeks. Obviously, with us hoping to get back to racing sooner than later. Adam, what's been filling your time the last several weeks, and what are your thoughts about hopefully getting back and being able to battle with your buddy Chris Borich here and maybe have some more of these final corner battles for some wins?
Yeah, it felt like 3 months. I mean, there's nothing going on, and what blows me away is there's not really an end goal because there's no way to tell when we'll be back. So we're working and still staying active, but how hard do we push? Because are we another month out? We 2 weeks out? So I recently went out to Nebraska last weekend and did some, what do they call it? Ranching or something. So I went out there, I was a cattleman. I think is what the term they use. So I went out there and I pulled some cedars. I herded 60 or 70 head into the one chute, and I did the whole insemination and did all that and went fishing, which I haven't done for years, and just really enjoyed myself. And I've been able to connect with a lot of people that I haven't seen in years because of, we're racing every weekend. So it's been honestly a blessing to be not racing, but on the other hand, the calendar back there is empty. And there ain't nothing going on, and I'm about to lose my mind. So I want to be back racing, but I have enjoyed my time off.
Well, that's good to see that you've been keeping busy and obviously having some new experiences. Sounds like a cool experience to get to go out west and try your hand at something different. Who knows, maybe someday you can open up the Adam McGill experience in Nebraska, and you can bring people out to ride four-wheelers and snowmobiles and also procreate cows. So that would be a lot of things that people I'm sure would love to pay money and learn from Adam McGill. Jared, next up to you in your basement studio there. Obviously 6 weeks into this quarantine and delay, not a full 6 week delay, but 6 weeks that we've kind of been on lockdown here. We've had 2 postponed GNCCs. We do still have a GNCC on the schedule for May 16th and 17th. It is on the schedule. It is a TBA, but we're hopeful that we'll get some news on that. That being said, what's been keeping you busy, and what are your thoughts on hopefully potentially getting back to racing, as all signs in the media even seem that things are starting to trend in a positive direction?
Oh man, my hands haven't been quite as full as Adam's hands, but still been
literally
busy with this.
Figuratively,
both. But literally, truthfully though, I've been staying busy making these happen. What when you watch one of these shows, what you don't see is getting everything lined up, and even whenever I screw up a little bit, and Dan thought we were going to do this tomorrow because I kind of miscommunicated with him. Little stuff like that. It takes up way more time than anybody thinks just to make this little Zoom show happen. But truthfully, I'm like everybody else. I'm ready to get back out there. I've actually been glad to sit inside for a little bit because when you do those first 3 rounds, we do them back to back to back to back. for our crew, we stay down south the whole time. So in one aspect, I was kind of glad to have some time off, but now that we're here in the middle of it, I'm going a little stir crazy. I'd like to, be out there sticking arrows on trees, riding dirt bikes, riding quads, and doing everything we do on a normal weekend. But the good news is we've got our fingers crossed. Really, really hopeful for that May 16th and 17th weekend. I don't want to give away too much, but it's sounding better and better by the day. And hopefully we're back to it that weekend. It'll be ultimately a little bit different. It's definitely not going to be a normal. We're not going back 100% normal the way things have always been, but we'll get as close to normal as we can.
Well, we'll surely look forward to that. And I'm sure Chris and Adam are happy to hear that news as well. I mean, we, again, hopeful that we'll be racing here in just under 3 weeks, probably closer to 2 weeks from the time, that this airs, and we'll be ready to get back to it, have a lot of fun. And Jared, you can go out there and get those arrows stapled up so we can make sure that we all find our way through those thick woods, wherever it is that we end up racing. And Griff's prompting me that I'm supposed to fill everybody in what I've been doing. Just same old. Spent about a month there getting Caleb Russell's new facility dialed in. Since then, been back to normal. Hopeful that we're going back racing. Keep watching, checking my inbox, waiting for that press release to say that GNCC is coming back online. And at that time, I want to make sure I'm ready to go. And just been riding, training, and enjoying life here in North Carolina. Like you guys kind of echoed, it's kind of been nice to have a little bit of a break, even though we were only 3 rounds in, but we all worked so hard getting ready for the season, and now we've kind of had this reset. So I think the racing action, I believe, is going to be fast and furious when we do return, hopefully in just a few short weeks here. And but in the meantime, definitely want to thank you, Adam, Chris, both you guys, for coming on and reliving this. If we do get an opportunity to do another one with you, Adam, I think we'll definitely try to find one of those 17 wins, so you can kind of get your revenge on these guys. You got plenty of wins. Thank you for being such a good sport and coming on. Chris, again, thank you for giving us your perspective on things. Jared, thank you for being in. Also, on behalf of Griff Cotter, Dan Reinhardt, everybody at the RacerTV studios who's making these things happen and keeping us entertained during our time away from racing, which we hope is coming to a close. And maybe we'll be able to continue with these after. And myself, Johnny Gallagher, thank you guys for tuning into this episode. And stay tuned. We may have more of these on the way, but it might be from a ongoing GNCC season, or the 2020 and a half GNCC season, as I'm starting to call it, once we get back to racing here in a short amount of time.